The DCEU, the superhero cinematic universe that was set to rival that of Marvel. Well, of course, that didn't happen. So today I'm going to go through and rank each and every one of these DCU films and kind of show how the DCU failed. On that note, let's get started.
Hate to say it, but you made a pretty good lantern out there.
Thanks.
Many people consider Green Lantern to not be the start of the DCU. Actually, DC and Warner Brothers was expecting Green Lantern to kick off this cinematic universe, but I think myself, those people at the studio, and most movie fans want to forget this movie ever happened. I mean, this was my first experience of DC on the big screen, and I can barely remember anything about this film. I mean, I had to look up a synopsis of the film on Google. Ryan Reynolds himself has regretted even doing the film in the first place, and in the post-credits scene of Deadpool 2, you see Deadpool find a version of Ryan Reynolds reading the Green Lantern script and shooting him straight in the head and killing him. So the sentiment out there is that Green Lantern should not have existed in the first place. Honestly, I don't think Green Lantern is as bad as most fans make it out to be, but it started this long line of dominoes that was soon to collapse the DCU universe.
We were watching Superman!
So now to a film that I consider the official start of the DCU, and that is Man of Steel. And for your first film in a cinematic universe, I honestly think it's pretty good. This film is what Nolan did for Batman and Batman Begins. Man of Steel is an origin story for the Superman character. Henry Cavill has that physique and acting ability to pull off a believable Superman and that duality between Clark Kent and Superman. What still bothers me about this movie, even now, is how they portray Superman. Superman is supposed to be like America's Boy Scout, truth, justice, the American way. He's supposed to be this optimistic, hopeful figure as Superman. I mean, the big S symbol on his chest is hope in Krypton, but his portrayal in Man of Steel is this dark, grittier kind of version of Superman. You have the movie start out on this civil war with Krypton and kind of develop the character of General Zod as opposition to Jor-El, and Kal-El having to come to Earth with his human parents, played by Diane Lane and Kevin Costner. Two of my favorite scenes and most impactful scenes in the movie involve Jonathan Kent. The first one being when Superman tries to rescue a bus full of children when he's younger. Basically, his father is like, oh, you shouldn't be doing this. Like, they would have died without you helping them. One very impactful scene is the scene involving a tornado when Jonathan Kent is sucked up into it. You really get to see how Superman's personality and traits developed from his parents on how he was raised. I think Michael Shannon as General Zod is one of the better villains of the DCEU. His plan to terraform the Earth to make it look like Krypton is something that is definitely within his character's wheelhouse, and I think the conflict between him and Superman is relatively believable. Now, one of the major problems within Man of Steel and throughout the DCU is the portrayal of Lois Lane. I think Amy Adams is trying her best as Lois Lane, but I never believed these two were either in love or had some kind of chemistry and relationship, and not really giving Lois much to do. The third act, though, is relatively exciting. I think the worst part of this movie is that moment where Superman snaps General Zod's neck. Like, I think this is a place where you start to lose some fans, because it's not exactly an action Superman would do, and obviously there's not a lot Superman could have done in that situation. But if you go back to the comics, Superman would always put General Zod back into the Phantom Zone. I think there's ways they could have wrote the third act to make it more in line with Superman's character. They obviously didn't do that. But I still think this film is really great and worth watching. One last thing is Hans Zimmer scores a lot of the music for the DCEU, and Hans Zimmer's score for Man of Steel is really incredible and I think still holds up to today. Overall, Man of Steel is a really great start to what should have been an amazing DCEU, and honestly, for some of its faults that I've talked about in the video, there are a lot of great things about it too. So I think Man of Steel deserves an A tier.
You're Batman. I got Batman and Superman over here.
Alright, Batman v Superman, honestly, kinda sucks. Like, I remember seeing this movie back in the day in the theater, and I knew even back then that there were some problems with it. The major problem with this movie is how dark and depressing it is. Even in a movie where you have this level of darkness and disparity, you would balance that with more levity and comedy. But this movie doesn't really do that, and if it tries comedy, it fails at that as well. This movie is honestly kind of a downer. A major problem is how they develop the characters of Batman and Superman. Both Batman and Superman in these movies murder people. Now, I discussed a lot of my problems with the darker portrayal of Superman in Man of Steel, but especially Batman in this movie takes a lot of inspiration from Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns. And in The Dark Knight Returns, he has a reason to be dark and broody and killing people because he's older and he's a broken Batman. I guess that's what Zack Snyder was trying to do with this version of Batman. You can especially see it in the costume. It's straight out of The Dark Knight Returns. But it's not a Batman that I want to see on the big screen in a major cinematic universe. The portrayal of Lex Luthor is definitely the worst part of this movie. I think they picked Jesse Eisenberg because of his work as Mark Zuckerberg in The Social Network, but that kind of nerdy, kind of social media type character is not what Lex Luthor is as a character. See, Lex Luthor is supposed to be this like vengeful, envious character that considers Superman an alien and a danger to Metropolis. What Jesse Eisenberg is doing is more in the likes of the Joker and the Riddler. It's just so bizarre in a movie that's really dark. Having this goofy comic book type character in it is just strange. I think some of this movie is salvaged and saved by the fight scenes and the action. Both the warehouse fight and the fight between Batman and Superman are some of the best scenes from DC I've seen on the big screen. Also, I think the conflict between Batman and Superman established honestly makes sense because Batman is always worried about world threats and especially superpowered beings. I still don't understand though why we didn't get a solo Batman movie before we got Batman v Superman. The fact we're never getting a solo Batman Ben Affleck movie is ridiculous. Like that script for that movie of him fighting Deathstroke, I really wanted to see on the big screen, and we're never gonna see it. So overall, Batman v Superman is not my favorite of the DCEU films, and I would consider it a C tier.
Well, I'm the Joker, baby.
To talk about Suicide Squad now? No, this is not James Gunn's Suicide Squad, it's David Ayer's Suicide Squad. When I saw this movie for the first time, I practically fell asleep. The pacing in this movie is straight up atrocious. The whole introduction to this movie is Amanda Waller describing each and every one of the characters in flashbacks. Each character gets their own musical track, it goes on for so long, it's just repetitive and boring. That's also how you can describe the entirety of the movie. Repetitive and boring. I think the cast is definitely trying their best, and the standouts are Harley Quinn, played by Margot Robbie, which you'll see more of in the rest of the DCU, Amanda Waller, which is perfect casting with Viola Davis, and Will Smith, well, he's playing Deadshot, but he's just playing Will Smith.
Oh, wow!
Enchantress as a villain is lame, gets no character development, and her minions just look like giant dog turds. One thing I really wish this movie had was more of the Joker, because Harley Quinn is a central part of the Suicide Squad, and the fact that they cut out a lot of the scenes with her and the Joker makes little sense if you're trying to establish her origin and have more interest towards the character. Like, one thing this movie was missing is definitely some Joker, even if it's been memed to eternity now. Suicide Squad is definitely a movie I don't want to watch again, and is very boring and lame. D tier.
They will not step into this most hallowed and forbidden no man's land.
Wonder Woman. What a surprise. Probably the best DCU film of them all. This is a film where Gal Gadot actually does a pretty good job as Wonder Woman and makes you believe her as this princess Amazonian. I think Chris Pine as Steve Trevor actually really helps to carry the movie. I think Steve Trevor and Diana are a really great pairing, and the fact that Steve Trevor is actually a true hero in this film, making this grandiose sacrifice at the end. Honestly, whatever Chris Pine's in, he tends to elevate the material, so having him as Steve Trevor was a real highlight for this film. The action scenes in this movie are really great, especially that one scene in No Man's Land, that World War I area with the trenches was really great. That scene will always stick out in my mind and is a really great representation of modern day cinema. Again, Hans Zimmer's score is something I really remember from this film. The CGI overall though in the action scenes is mixed. Some of it's really great, some of it's not so good. I think the worst part would technically be the villains. The German officers that we're supposed to think are the main villains of the film are not very compelling, so we don't exactly get very interested in their arcs. And Ares, the supposed twist villain, which is very obvious because it's just the guy with the mustache, a literal mustache twirling villain. I still think this film is really great and deserves an S tier.
Like brunch. Like, what is brunch?
So Justice League, not the Zack Snyder version of Justice League, but the Joss Whedon version of Justice League. It's not that good. A lot of the problems of this film is just because of how condensed the film has become. Zack Snyder's original plan for the film was 4 hours, and the studio tried to condense it into a 2-hour film. In doing that, they kind of brought in Joss Whedon to stitch together the film and add more jokes into places where there shouldn't be jokes. I mean, they even reshot some of the scenes just to add in jokes. Bad jokes. That's probably why they hired Joss Whedon in the first place, because he had directed the Avengers and you get that kind of MCU funny Marvel humor. The characters really don't get enough development and room to breathe where you can really kind of root for them or root against them in the first place. The visual style is definitely bizarre, where they kind of just put the saturation meter up where everything's super oversaturated. A lot of the end battle is this weird orangish hue, and it just doesn't contrast well with the rest of the cinematic universe with Zack Snyder's more grittier, darkier tone. The main villain, Steppenwolf's design is not very good, and his character is not well developed or interesting at all in this. The first Justice League movie is kind of a mess, and honestly, I'm glad they decided to improve it in the Zack Snyder version. So, I'm gonna give it a C tier for me.
Aquaman fucks fish?
Yeah.
So Aquaman is actually a pretty enjoyable and fun movie. Jason Momoa is actually really good in the Aquaman role and makes Aquaman cool again. Aquaman in the comics is just like this blonde-haired guy who talks to fish. And in this film, they really give Aquaman more development. How Arthur Curry is torn between the surface world and Atlantis, kind of like how Ariel is torn between that and The Little Mermaid. The underwater action is really exciting. James Wan creates this whole underwater universe of Atlantis and makes it very believable to the audience. I think the CGI is really great and stylized to fit this tone of Atlantis and all the interesting creatures that surround it. Also, the villains are amazing and really believable for their motivations. Ocean Master is pissed off at the human world for kind of breaking up their family. I thought introducing Black Manta was also smart and showing how Black Manta has this kind of vengeance against Aquaman because Aquaman was responsible for the killing of his father. Even though his father was kind of a bad guy, I mean, he was like a pirate, so. The only thing I really have problems with this movie is the side or supporting characters because they don't really have a lot to do. Don't have a lot of space to develop, but overall, I think James Wan did an incredible job making this film, and I think it still stands up as a really fun, enjoyable film that I could rewatch at any time. B tier for me.
Welcome to Beat Shazam!
Now, if there's a movie I could definitely rewatch on repeat, it's Shazam. The first Shazam is incredible for just how fun, enjoyable, lifelike it is compared to the rest of the DCEU. I mean, a lot of the DCEU has been depressing or takes place in a different part of the world, but Shazam is just this down-to-life, everyday kind of person. This movie is all about family and how Billy Batson has to adapt to his new foster parents and family. I thought they did a great job with Billy Batson and his origin story of becoming Shazam, made up of all these older Greek gods. I thought the relationship between Freddy and Billy was definitely believable, and his transformation from this younger Billy Batson to him coming into his own with his powers as Shazam. The scenes that make me laugh out loud is when Billy is testing out his powers for the first time and having Freddy in the background kind of helping him develop those powers is really fun to watch. I thought having Dr. Savannah as a villain was quite interesting. I think how they introduced him in this origin story of his father and his brother being kind of a dick to him and him trying to adopt the Shazam powers was really compelling. It makes sense why he wants to take revenge on his father later in his life, where he basically attacks his corporate office and throws him out a window. Also, Dr. Savannah taking powers from the 7 deadly sins and being controlled by them. I think some of the weaker parts of the movie, though, is with Dr. Savannah in the second or third act, because he looks somewhat disinterested in fighting Shazam, and they don't give him a proper reason why he would be fighting Shazam in the first place. I think Shazam is a very fun and enjoyable movie that I could watch on repeat. A tier for me.
No one does it better than the Birds of Prey.
Birds of Prey. Maybe it's not a movie that's made for me or anything, but I don't exactly enjoy Birds of Prey. I think it's interesting the characters they introduce in this film. You have Harley Quinn, Huntress, Black Canary, Renee Montoya, and Cassandra Cain. And these 5 basically create the team of the Birds of Prey. And they're trying to protect Cassandra against Black Mask. Now, Black Mask is played by Ewan McGregor, and also Victor Zsasz, who is kind of his main man. I think Ewan McGregor does the best he can as Black Mask, but he's not exactly the most threatening character. I think Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn, though, is definitely a standout in whatever movie she's in. As mediocre as I think this film is, Margot Robbie is the heart and soul of this film. I also really like how they introduce the hyena pets that you kind of see in Batman the Animated Series. Overall, this movie is definitely not my cup of tea, so I'd put this movie at probably a D tier.
Oh yeah! He has made his first wish!
Wonder Woman 1984. I think Patty Jenkins had a bad day at the office when she made this. How can you go from the greatness of the first Wonder Woman to this film? The first scene goes on for so long, and it's basically a flashback of Diana doing this Olympics obstacle course-like event, and it's just boring. It's also so disjointed and disconnected from the rest of the film that takes place in the 1980s. I feel like you should have just started the film in that shopping mall. Also, I think Gal Gadot doesn't pull off as strong as the performance as in the first one, especially because she's given so much more heavy lifting than in the first film that she has to pull off, and I don't think it quite lands. Chris Pine is always doing his best as he can in these films. I think it's so bizarre how they make Steve Trevor basically embody this completely different person. Like, Diana's kissing just this random guy, but it's Steve Trevor. I thought the villains were okay. Cheetah is basically Michelle Pfeiffer in Batman Returns. She's kind of this nerdy type that gets the powers and becomes Cheetah to better herself, I guess. I think Pedro Pascal is doing his best in the role as Maxwell Lord, and is definitely one of the better parts of Wonder Woman 1984. I think the whole plot of him trying to find this MacGuffin that grants wishes to people is straight up bizarre and doesn't fit the tone of the film at all. I thought the action scenes were alright, some of them are better than others. I thought the way in which Wonder Woman stops Maxwell Lord is actually pretty smart, and is very different from many punch-out superhero battles that we've seen in the third act. The fact she just talks him down is really interesting. Although I can say about this movie is there's a lot of horrible line deliveries, and there have been memes made about them constantly. Wonder Woman 1984 is definitely a step down from the first Wonder Woman, and I would definitely put it at a D tier.
You want another movie to release? Because I got the shit.
Zack Snyder's Justice League. Now this movie is fucking awesome. I'm not a huge Zack Snyder fan, but I even have to admit that this movie is incredible. Hashtag release the Snyder Cut was all over the internet and social media. And for good reason. I mean, compared to the theatrical version back in 2017, there's like no comparison. A movie that practically spans 4 hours, and the pacing is so great that you can't even feel those 4 hours go by. I mean, how do you do that with a film? With that 4-hour runtime, we get to develop each and every one of the Justice League members that we don't get to in the theatrical version. Cyborg gets a whole origin story, has such more compelling arc and so much to do. The Flash is so much more understandable with him trying to get his father out of prison and his whole heroic moment in the third act of him turning back time. Steppenwolf is so much more compelling with his new redesign and the fact he's doing all this in the service of Darkseid, so you get that overlooming threat of Darkseid. If there's anything bad I could say about this film is maybe just the director indulgence of it. I like 4:3 aspect ratios as much as the next person, but having it in your epic superhero film doesn't make any sense to me. When I want to see a superhero movie, I want to see it on the big screen, in IMAX, in that long widescreen ratio. And the extended epilogue and post-credit scenes with Martian Manhunter and that kind of Injustice type ending was more of an indulgence than a proper post-credit scene, so I think that whole epilogue portion is kind of out of place. But other than that, Zack Snyder made a really incredible, epic Lord of the Rings style film. S tier.
Assemble Task Force X. We have another suicide mission.
The Suicide Squad. James Gunn can do no wrong. This is another incredible film. It has definite marked improvement over the last Suicide Squad film, and you can just tell by watching it. You have some returning members, some new members, and that mixture of kind of the back and forth between the characters and the dialogue is pretty much at the heart of this film. I thought it was smart just to put us into the action in the beginning of the film, and we get to see a lot of the members of the Suicide Squad kick the dust. I mean, the fact you set up the stakes right away is super smart because you'll never know which members of the Suicide Squad are next to get killed or if they'll survive throughout the entirety of the film. Each and every single one of the members of the Suicide Squad gets their own character arc, and it shows. Some of the more compelling ones are Polka Dot Man, out of all people, kind of overcoming his mom's abuse as a kid. Also, King Shark wanting friends. I mean, you think a CGI giant shark would not be a compelling character, but James Gunn somehow makes him, through the facial expressions and through no dialogue, makes him such a compelling and heartbreaking character. I thought the jokes were incredibly funny, especially that side quest with Harley Quinn for being captured by an enemy government and hooking up with the leader of that government was really smart and funny. One of the huge highlights of this film, though, is Peacemaker. James Gunn makes this very obscure character of Peacemaker so much more compelling in this film, and him not actually being a nice guy, him being this more of an anti-hero, and him betraying Rick Flag at the end of the film was heartbreaking, but made sense for the character that they developed. Also, this film is a reason that Peacemaker exists, so that's also a reason I really love it as well. I think having an R rating adds to the stakes of the film and makes sense for that of the Suicide Squad, where they're straight up killing people on every mission. Having Starro the Conqueror come out as the main boss in the end was incredible and had me laughing out loud for them pulling out such an obscure character, but fit perfectly in the tone that James Gunn developed throughout the film. The Suicide Squad is one of those films that's special that came out of the DCEU, and James Gunn heading the new DCEU probably started from seeing this film in the first place. I have to give this film an S tier. There's no other ranking you can give this film.
The hierarchy of power in the DC universe is about to change.
Black Adam, or should I say the Justice Society film. Because for a film featuring Black Adam, all I could look at was the Justice Society. The Justice Society in this film encompasses Atom Smasher, Hawkman, Cyclone, but especially Dr. Fate. One of the perfect castings to come out of the DCU was Dr. Fate, played by Pierce Brosnan. I mean, you can't get a more perfect actor for this role. He embodies what Dr. Fate should be on the big screen. I was so crushed when Dr. Fate makes a sacrifice at the end, because I was like, oh no, Pierce Brosnan is never going to come back as Dr. Fate, and that is a tragedy. James Gunn, you better put Pierce Brosnan as Dr. Fate in the new universe. I swear you better. Now, Black Adam. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is alright as Black Adam. I don't think the praise for this film should be, oh, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is finally not playing himself in a film. Like, that's not a positive, that's just Rock doing Rock shtick. I will say he's definitely not changing the hierarchy of the DCEU. I thought his whole motivation of doing this in the first place was over the guilt of his son saving him was pretty great. The human characters are pretty shallow and are just put there to showcase the collateral damage and how that affects the city around them. The villain is not that memorable and is basically just possessed by demons. I guess that's cool. Also, I know most people enjoy this post-credits scene, but I would have loved to see Shazam instead of Superman, because Shazam is the main hero that Black Adam fights in the comic books, and I don't necessarily think that the Superman Black Adam pairing is the first one you should think of. I think Black Adam is a fun movie for the action, not a very compelling story, and I think a lot of the heart is because of the Justice Society. So overall, I give this movie a C tier, just for Pierce Brosnan.
I am a god, you dull creature, and I will not be bullied by that.
Shazam 2 is fine and relatively inoffensive. But the big elephant in the room is Black Adam. Like, Black Adam got his own solo movie, but the perfect pairing would have been Shazam versus Black Adam in this film. So instead of Black Adam being the villain in this movie, they decide to pair him with these new god characters. The Queen, Helen Mirren, Lucy Liu, and Rachel Zegler. And I think they're all fine, they're doing their best. I honestly think Helen Mirren is probably the better acted one of the three. But they're still not the most compelling villain characters, and are just looking for another MacGuffin. There are some sweet moments between Billy and the rest of the Shazam family. It doesn't have the heart as much as it did in the first Shazam film. That's what made the original so special, was the heart and soul of that Shazam family, and I think if they focused more in on that in this film, it would have been more compelling. Billy's death was also kind of strange to me, because I figured they weren't going to kill off their main character, and the fact they go to Themyscira and Wonder Woman at the ending to revive Billy was just weird and a bizarre cameo to have in a Shazam film. Now, I don't totally hate this movie, I think it's pretty okay. Honestly, I think the best parts of this movie is watching David F. Sandberg, he has his own YouTube channel, and showing the whole behind the scenes of how this movie was made is definitely way more interesting than watching the movie in the first place. So I would give this movie probably a C tier because I think it's okay, it's not one of the worst outings of the DCEU.
It was me, Barry. I jerked you off at super speed.
Yes, The Flash. I honestly really enjoyed The Flash the first time I saw it in theaters with a couple of friends, but as I reflect on it more, I don't think it's as strong as when I saw it in the theater. I heard a lot of jokes on the internet and online that they should retitle this movie Batman Flashpoint, and I don't totally disagree with that, because a lot of this film is not The Flash. And if they were trying to stick closely to the Flashpoint storyline, I don't think they did a great job in adapting that either. Now, in the film, Ezra Miller as the Flash tries to go back in time to stop his mother from being killed so his father isn't convicted for the crime of murder. In doing that, he kind of tears apart the multiverse and changes reality itself. In doing so, we get to see characters like Michael Keaton's Batman. All that action with Michael Keaton's Batman is incredible, and the director of this film, Andy Muschietti, is set to write and direct Batman the Brave and the Bold in the DCEU, and I couldn't be more excited because this Batman action is some of the best I have ever seen. Whether it's that chase in the city with Ben Affleck's Batman, or the fight scene in that nuclear bunker with Michael Keaton's Batman when they're trying to save Supergirl. I think this movie has a lot of characters they're trying to balance as well. You have General Zod from Man of Steel, you have Supergirl, you have the different versions of the Flash, you have the different versions of Batman, a cameo with Wonder Woman. I thought some of the cameos were questionable and maybe a bit disrespectful for the fact you're reviving actors that have been dead for decades. The whole idea of the Chronoball is kind of cool, but the fact they said that the CGI is supposed to look bad, like, I get it's a stylized choice, But you could make the CGI look better. I mean, the only reason the CGI looks like this is probably because they ran out of time. I think you shouldn't gaslight the audience into trying to accept your visuals by saying they're bad on purpose. There's some sweet moments between the Flash and talking to his parents are pretty well and help develop the character as a whole. I thought the ending was straight up hilarious, where the Flash comes back, he thinks everything's normal, and then he tries to talk to Batman, and George Clooney, of all people, comes out of the limousine and starts walking towards him and talks to Barry. That scene was specifically put there to troll the audience. There's no other way to put it. Overall, I think this film was good, not great, and with some more work, it could have been a really incredible film, especially because you're modeling it after Flashpoint. I would give this movie a B tier.
Clever little bugs.
Blue Beetle is a surprisingly great movie that I didn't get to see in the theaters. Like, I watched it on HBO Max, and this movie is just incredible. This movie has such a great heart. It just makes you feel good watching it. The whole family dynamic is just great. The characters are so touching and impactful when talking to Jaime, which is our main character of Blue Beetle. The comedy always works between the characters. If you hire George Lopez, your jokes are going to be funny regardless. Jaime, who is turned into the Blue Beetle, is a great addition to the DCEU, and I'm glad James Gunn is keeping him on in the new DCEU universe. I mean, this actor is doing his all to make Blue Beetle, which is a character I don't even know the most about, such a compelling and interesting character. I think the whole fact of the character being an immigrant, and you have this kind of classism between the richer company and kind of their lower middle class situation, is a really great dynamic and contrast throughout the film. Especially with that kind of suit up scene with Jaime in the Blue Beetle outfit, kind of reminded me of the first Iron Man film. Blue Beetle is a huge surprise within the DCU universe, and is an incredible, fun family film. I would give Blue Beetle an A tier.
The lost city of Atlantic City.
Boy, I hope we don't lose focus.
Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. What a way to end your cinematic universe. This movie is a huge disappointment, and what a way to fumble the bag. This movie is basically the equivalent of a Saturday morning cartoon on steroids. This movie is so sloppily written, and the plot in general is just so uninteresting. The fact that Black Manta finds this trident from another kingdom and is possessed by this ghost entity from another kingdom that wants to take over the rest of the world or something is so stupid and plays off terribly throughout the film. This movie could have been so great if you'd taken that character of Black Manta from the previous movie, and we could have really seen a battle between Aquaman and Black Manta. Sort of like how they developed the characters in Black Panther. That conflict between T'Challa and Killmonger is so much more interesting and compelling because of how they establish Killmonger's identity. So overall, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom might be the worst out of all of the DCU films to me. Maybe because I watched it the most recently, or the fact I was just so disappointed in it. I would give Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom an F tier.
Peacemaker. What a joke.
I know I was only going to talk about the films in this video, but I have to talk about Peacemaker. One of the best things to come out of the DCU and continue in the DC universe was Peacemaker. James Gunn takes the character of Peacemaker and gives him more humanity and makes him more down to earth so we can understand how Peacemaker became such an anti-hero and such a dick. It was so heartbreaking seeing the relationship between Chris and his abusive father in the show. It was just so real and felt so authentic. Peacemaker is such a bitter and broken man, and you can see throughout the show how he becomes more and more of a better character. This is the role in which I really saw John Cena is not just like this comedic actor WWE star. John Cena is really great in this role, and he's really becoming a great actor. They carry over characters like Hardcourt and Diebeard from the Suicide Squad films, and they make really great side characters to Peacemaker's antics. Vigilante is a great sidekick to Peacemaker, and his comedic timing with Peacemaker is just incredible. I thought the villains, being the butterflies, were great in kind of this invasion of the body snatchers situation. Again, Peacemaker's father, being White Dragon, is one of the most vile and disgusting villains we've seen off his pure personality and racism. This show does a great job balancing those extreme comedic moments with the extreme emotional, serious moments with his father. I will say this show definitely has one of the best openings of a TV show I've ever seen. The tone of the serious dancing perfectly fits that of the entirety of the show. Although James Gunn is really going to have to explain why the Justice League is in the first season of Peacemaker now that we have a new DC universe. Of course, I'm putting Peacemaker at S tier. Could you have guessed?
Yeah, tell that to my dad.
Peacemaker, shut the fuck up!
Do y'all want to be here till tomorrow?
Yes, I have ranked every DCU film that they made in the old universe. So how do you think of these older DCU films? Do you enjoy them or hate them as much as I do? Are you excited for the new universe? Leave your thoughts in the comments down below. And all I can say is,
I appreciate you watching. I hope this was exciting for you because it's really exciting for me. And I can't wait to start to dive into these stories with you guys on this grand adventure. Thank you so much.